Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We will begin with our prayer to be followed by the national anthem. May we request everyone to put yourselves in the presence of our Almighty God. Let us put ourselves in the presence of God. God Almighty, thank you for bringing us together to celebrate Cebuano culture and heritage through the sharing of our stories. We need this in this time of uncertainty, O God, to remind us of our identity as a people, unique and blessed and proud. This reminder must inspire us that whatever challenges we face, whether unseen, alien, and treacherous, can always be overcome if we are united in working for the present and the future, and for the heritage of our children and community. We pray for our present-day heroes who are fighting against the virus, as well as other threats that besiege us today. For our own people struggling to overcome these threats, and for those who have died, fallen, but never forgotten. Dearest God, heal our land. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa sibay at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulakawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidinig. Luman ang araw ng walhaging pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na pagkay mga aking, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Maayong hapon mga Cebuanon. Welcome to Gabii sa Kabilin 2021 online activities. This is an engaging space to appreciate and experience Cebu's culture and heritage.
Mayong hapon sa tanan. Heidi Palapar here, GSK Event Director and your moderator for this afternoon's program. Welcome to the November webinar of Gabii sa Kabilin online activities. Daghang salamat to everyone who has joined us this afternoon from Cebu and other parts of the region, Region 7, and the country, even those outside of the Philippines, and especially to our teachers from DepEd and the private schools. The Gabii sa Kabilin, the summer heritage event of Cebu, continues its aim to preserve and promote local culture and heritage through the museums. Despite this pandemic, the Cebuano heritage community has continued to convene and collaborate to deliver online or virtual activities, with the belief that in this time of confusion and disconnection, our sense of identity and pride of place can be beacons of hope and strength. Also, we continue to commemorate the 500 years since the arrival of Magellan and Spanish influences, the introduction of Christianity, and the victory at Mactan by aligning our GSK online activities to the said occasion. This afternoon, our webinar focuses on cemeteries, especially in Cebu. Certainly a Christian influence and a means for evangelization and colonization. But in this webinar, we will also discuss old cemeteries as symbols, where we will find symbols in these burial grounds with their meanings, as well as about burial practices and other interesting facts about cemeteries in Cebu. Before I introduce our speaker, may I just remind everyone that after the lecture, we have our Q&A, of course, with trivia, where you can win prizes. Also, for those who are here joining us and want to get a certificate of participation, please note that we will post the link and open the evaluation after the webinar and only up to midnight later at 11:59 p.m. to be sure. Now to introduce our speaker. Jobers, or more formally Dr. Jose Eleazar R. Bersales, is the director of the University of San Carlos Museum, manager of the University of San Carlos Press, and head of the USC Communications Office. He is also a full professor at the USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History. He holds a PhD in anthropology with an archaeology dissertation from the University of San Carlos on a sandwich program with the New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico, USA. It was at NMSU that Jobers trained in the archaeology of Central American Maya in Belize and Guatemala. Jobers was also German academic exchange scholar at the University of Bielefeld from 1997 to 1999 and an Asia Research Institute ASEAN graduate scholar at the National University of Singapore in 2006. He also trained in GIS in archaeology at the Larenstein University of Professional Education in the Netherlands in 2007 under a Dutch MHO grant. Dr. Bersales was once a national president of UGAT, the Anthropological Association of the Philippines. Currently, he heads the National Committee on Museums of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts and is the Cebu Provincial Consultant for Museum and Heritage Affairs. He is also a member of the Cebu Archdiocesan Commission for Culture and the Arts and the Cebu City Cultural and Historical Affairs Commission. Jobers has written or co-authored a number of heritage books, including Salapi, the numismatic heritage of the Philippines, which won an Anvil Platinum and Anvil Gold in the 50th Anvil Awards in 2014, as well as The War in Cebu, which is a finalist in the 2016 National Book Awards. He is currently writing a book on the archaeology of Cebu for the National Quincentennial Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jose Eleazar Bersales, or Dr. Jobers.
Okay, thank you very much to the Ramon Awaitis Foundation, Inc., especially the Gabii sa Kabilin program and the Kabilin Center of the Ramon Awaitis Foundation, Inc., or RAFI, and especially Ms. Heidi Palapar, the head of the Cultural Heritage Program of RAFI, for this invitation. The topic I'm going to talk about is central to my advocacy. I've always advocated for the preservation of historic and heritage cemeteries in Cebu. And I hope we can learn something after this presentation. So eternal rest, enduring heritage, exploring the past in Cebu cemeteries. You are looking at the Carita Cemetery, the new one, the newer one, because there's an older one. Both are of the Spanish period, but I suspect this is the more recent one, later into the Spanish period, towards the end of the Spanish period. Looking northwest. Of course, the burial plots there are no longer of the Spanish period; they're very modern already. I will talk about a brief history of cemeteries, the Cebu's old cemeteries, and what heritage you can get out of them and what should be done with these cemeteries. Briefly, though, I'd like to, even before the Spaniards arrived, we were already burying our dead. The practice of burial is I think in part of human existence. No, we don't just. I think there's the earliest evidences of taking care of the dead have been found in the Neolithic, even among or Paleolithic, even among the Neanderthals, which were not yet the human species that we are. Very near. There's evidence, I think, in Germany of a Neanderthal burial with some pollen or flowers, so evidence that they did bury their dead. Even at the time, maybe like what, 50,000 years ago. Now, in this photo is, of course, if you're familiar with our excavations, San Remigio, this was our finds in July. One of the units we excavated had this Philippine Metal Age burials. So Metal Age or Iron Age dates to about 500 CE, 500 BC to about 900 or even 1200 CE, overlapping with a period of trading with the Chinese, the Arabs, and Thai and later Vietnamese. The fact that we have indigenous words, native words like samang and hubgas, means that we did bury our dead. It's not something introduced by the Spaniards. We use cementerio today, but that's Spanish. No? But on radios and in TV news reports, when they talk of burial places, they still use, the newscasters still use the word samang. And hubgas would have been a long period where the dead are still on the ground, and then you do hubkas after you can afford the ritual required. So all of you contribute, all the relatives contribute money to remove the bones of the dead, clean them up, and then put them on a container, perhaps bring them to a cave or bring them to the house, to a lofty place, according to Chirino and Combes, the Jesuit chroniclers. Who said that some of the burial places were either beside the house, underneath the house, or in a place that's really dedicated to it. If you're the son if it's the son of the dato, a slave would be assigned to clean the burial place every day and watch over it, something like that. And but the Spanish chroniclers also said that some of the dead were brought to the house on a lofty area of the house, and you can do that with a recent dead. So this must have been secondary burial practice, where after hubkas, the bones are removed and then put onto the house to be near the relatives who are still alive. It's also probably a part of the practice of ancestor worship, praying to our relatives who have passed on to help us in our day-to-day lives. During the Spanish period, so we have during the Spanish period, you have this one. Before 1789 and 1807, these are two important periods in Philippine Spanish history. In 1789, there was a royal ordinance issued, royal decree issued to move burials outside of churchyards or churches or church grounds, and about a kilometer away, 1789. But it took a long time for that to be implemented. There was a lot of resistance. People thought, now you put the dead so far away, who will watch over it? No, kanun na kautod sa mga iro kuno, kanun mga langgam. It was very morbid for Filipinos at the time, for the Indios, for the natives, to imagine their dead layo from the church, 1 kilometer away usually, because of issues of contamination, germs, and ng gawas naman, I think, concepts of germ theory at the time. But it took a long time. In fact, it was in 1807 that there was an ordinance issued to create the first extramural, or outside the wall, for Intramuros, outside of Intramuros burial, which is Paco Cemetery, which is now a park, converted into a park. So 1807, but it took a long time even to construct the cemetery. I think 1820s park nabuhat, and it's the first cemetery outside of the town, or 1 kilometer away, according to an author, according to Dakudao in his book, I think, Cemeteries in the Philippines, something like that, published by the Philippine Quarterly of Culture and Society, which is so before this period, all the burials were beside the church. So you have here, for example, and they're called Campo Santo. So you have, for example, this mortuario chapel or crypt where the dead would be prayed upon. It's you find this on the epistle side of on the gospel side. When you're facing the church, it's on the left of the Laget. And the Laget church was built around the late 1700s and finished around the early 1800s. There would have been an earlier church before that, and I think this dates to that earlier church. So the burials there would be around this area, this churchyard, on the left side when facing the Delegate Church, because the other side is the convent connected to the church, which is typical of Augustinian churches. The convents are always connected to the church because the just walk into the when not hearing mass could go at the back and listen. So the other side would have been the burial place. So there should be a lot of burials there, Christian burials in Delegate, in the same manner of Bolhoon also, which is also on the other side, on the right, because the convento of Bolhoon is connected on its left side. No? So the right side, the open space, you find the Campo Santo. Unfortunately, the Delegate Churchyard Cemetery does not carry the symbols of a skull and all that. Unlike the one in Bolhoon, where on top you find a skeleton carved in coral stone or in limestone, on limestone, and to signal that you are entering a Campo Santo or a sacred ground, no, for the dead. And when Bolhoon was declared, I think in 2004, as a national treasure, the burying of the dead there was stopped. So you find burials there, still there, the date to the 70s to the 80s, no, I think up to the 90s. Even if they have a burial cemetery about exactly 1 kilometer out south, near beside the national road and south road to Oslo. Those are just two examples. You also find them in Argao, and then you would imagine also at the Basilica, they would have, and in the cathedral, the grounds of the cathedral would have a lot of burials which are Christian, as well as that of the old Parian Church, which today is the Parian Fire Station, and also all other churches of the early Spanish period, no, which were built before 1780s or 1800s. Some are inside the churches, in fact. Some are bones which were removed from outside and then put in. And these are usually of the Principalia or the elite who donate to the church. And so they're given the privilege of putting their dead, the bones of their dead, on walls or posts or columns of the church. This would not, I don't think these are whole bodies, because if you go to Karkar, these are just, tomb markers on posts, columns. The church would collapse if you open a column to put a body inside. So these are really secondary burials. The bones are removed and put inside the walls of the church to ensure that prayers are constant for the dead, for this dead. No, it was a privilege. So you can still see the practice of the hierarchy in society also happens among the dead. Only those that can afford to donate to the church are able to put the bones of their dead on the walls of the church. There's a beautiful poetry here. Dedication on Francisca Canava Kang Rehis, in Visaya, about lamentation, kuan kasubo and all that. And in Sibonga, you find this is a ceramic wreath. It clearly came from Italy. This in typical style of Capo di Monte, which was for Doña Petrona Lucero de Teves, no, and what's the other one? But it's a couple, no, so they must have been really extremely rich, and the other one was either fell off or it was stolen. Okay? It's a set of three. This really came from Italy, and this may be in the late Spanish period or early American period. Put here, I think these are the only ones in Sibonga that are on inside the church. Unlike in Karkar, which is so full of that, at the cathedral you do not find that anymore. So also at the Basilica, I think these were removed when the Basilica was restored. I'm not sure, but the Basilica has a crypt of the friars, no, of their Augustinian friars also. Okay, just as the cathedral has a burial place at the back of all the bishops, most of the bishops who died, who served in Cebu and who died here, including, of course, our very own His Eminence Ricardo Cardinal Vidal, who served the Archdiocese for a long time and is buried at the back of that sacristy. There's a special burial plot there for them. So what are Cebu City's Spanish era cemeteries? I can name three of them. Well, there are four of them actually. The San Nicolas Catholic Cemetery, which is also known as Calamba, where the revolutionaries met in 1898 to forward the revolution, advance the revolution ahead. Instead of Palm Sunday, happened on Good Friday. Or wait, instead of Good Friday, happened on Palm Sunday. No, it had to be advanced. And they met here before they moved down to straight to what is now Tres de Abril Street. So it's historic. There's a date, 1898. So that is the revolution. So it existed even before that. And then there's the Carita Cemetery, which is a newer one, more recent, maybe by 20 to 30 years compared to this so-called heritage park, or what is often referred to as the old Carita, owned by the Archdiocese of Cebu, but donated by the Cardinal, Ricardo Cardinal Vidal, the late Cardinal, to the city of Cebu during the term of first term, I think, as mayor of Mayor Mike Rama. And sadly, it has changed. I mean, it's different from well, I'll talk about that later. There's a lot of changes that happened there. Even if the Mayor Mike wants to turn it into a heritage park, I think it's becoming more difficult to do that. Yeah. Okay. We have American era. In the American era, the Americans introduced non-denominational cemeteries, whereas in the Spanish period, cemeteries were all Catholic, religious based. And then when the Aglipay came, there was they split, and the revolutionary Philippine Independent Church also had their own cemeteries. The American era introduced non-denominational, so you could be buried in municipal cemeteries or public cemeteries, regardless of your religion. And one of those that you find, two of those is one is race-based. The two are race-based. You have the Spanish and the Chinese, but I'll talk about the Spanish later. Here you find the Cebu Chinese Cemetery, which was built around 1915, and you see the octagon, the Pakwa, which is the yin-yang compass for determining feng shui, is that of the founder or the builder of the cemetery, Benito Tan Onchuan, who died very young, 42 years old. I think he must have donated his property, or he was the first to develop it, because his burial plot is right at the center, north, south, east, west. Exactly, compass points, north, south, east, west. Important is a Chinese. No? And that's important heritage. No? Of the Bakwa, of the eight-sided, the octagon, in geomancy or feng shui of the Chinese. So it sits right smack on the four large avenues unta of the Cebu Chinese Cemetery. That's race-based. It's not religious-based. And then you have an American veterans plot, which must have been built around 1903 during the cholera epidemic, because there are some of those who buried there, I think, date to that period. And it's being taken care of by the Santo Rosario Church under, I think, Father Joey Belsinia. And then in the post-war period, you have commercial non-denominational cemeteries, like the Cebu Memorial Park, which was laid in 1966. Sem Park, which is now in Manila. It's like us now. When you say Golden Haven, people say, "Where is that?" In Budlan. It's so far away. But inana ang feeling tingali sa mga tao at that time, because this was really very far away. But of course, the Talamban campus of San Carlos was already open by 1963. Mas layo pag yun. But puro sila mga agian, madaplit sa dalan. Must have been a dirt road, difficult to navigate during ulan. But this was started by the Chongbians, I think. Yeah, and And it's successful, very successful. In fact, it's almost full or full now. No, and it's high end. No? This concept of non-denominational, so non-religious commercial cemeteries. And then the Queen City was, I think, inaugurated, excuse me, the following year, or maybe it's the other way around, 66, 67, ang Duha, which sits beside the Chinese cemetery, but it's already on the North Reclamation area. It's the reclamation made by Serhing Osmeña, the father of the son of Don Sergio, who was very ambitious in the 50s and then reclaimed the whole area. And a section of it is called Queen City Gardens. And it still exists today, no? Katubangan sa katong white gold sa unang giusab karon, no? Yeah, I think a section of this was bulldozed recently, and there's a kaso kay Ludo and Luim Foundation also owns a section of this another section, no, of this area. Okay, so that's in just the history of cemeteries. And so if you look at Queen City, if you look at Sem Park, they've already reached more than 50 years old. So under RA 1066, the National Cultural Heritage Law, even those cemeteries will require permission from the National Cultural Agencies if they're going to be closed or going to be removed. The plots are to be removed, because I heard there's a plan to make business out of the property, build condominiums in the manner of Singapore, which removed so many historic cemeteries in the 70s to give way to high-end subdivisions and high-end condominiums and all that. So what we have now are cemeteries that now fulfill the requirement of under RA 166 of being heritage, belonging to more than 50 years. But what is heritage in the cemetery? Now, heritage, the concept of cultural heritage is there are values attached to heritage, and UNESCO has defined these values. But for cemeteries, the values that you find are historical, so they contain persons important to local history or national history, or the site itself is historical. There's aesthetic or artistic, where you find, for example, this one is in Ohlsdorf in Hamburg, one of the largest cemeteries in the world, which is a tourist attraction. There are daily tours where you pay to go around the 380 acres of this cemetery, which contains the children's section, the war section, World War I, the World War II section, the rich families section, and then the paupers' graves and all that. So you have aesthetic, so the design, the sculptures that are there. You also have architectural. You have mausoleums or structures that are built. So there's architectural value. And you may also have natural, because cemeteries, the larger cemeteries, may contain important tree species, mga acacia and all the animals that live in them, mga birds and all that. So these are the kinds of heritage that values that we will look at in terms of the cemeteries. Do they have this? Okay, so we go through them now. Before we proceed, there are some famous cemeteries in the world that have become tourist attractions. As earlier I said, Ohlsdorfer Friedhof means cemetery in German, is in Hamburg. It's one of the world's largest. It's a tourist attraction. There are daily tours. Of course, before COVID-19, there were daily tours. You pay for the tour and people go tour you around there. It's a beautiful park. When I was there in 1997, if I remember right, and you pass by it on a large, very long, very wide highway, and it stretches for ages as the bus moves through the highway. Taas gid kayo. Dako kay ni siya nga cemetery, and it contains so many beautiful sculptures, so many beautiful architecture, period architecture. late America, the 1900s, 1800s, Art Deco and all that. So the architectural movements are represented here. You know? And then you have Saint Paul de Vence in France, no, where it's not that distinctive, but there's a person inside buried there, the Marc Chagall, no? And people go there to visit Marc Chagall's burial plot. In the same manner that people go to Paris, Montmartre, to visit many of the artists, painters who are buried there, because Montmartre, the hilltop church and the community is an artist community, and many artists are buried in the cemetery there. And you have beautiful Orthodox Christian burials like Mary Cemetery in Sapanta, Romania, no? In Sapanta, Romania, where you have all these beautiful, colorful, and really tourist attractions. But they're beautiful, they're clean. That's the secret in making them tourist attractions, they're clean. Oh, napil ni kaya, nangita ko photograph niya. I couldn't find a photo without me. Anyway, this is a Trinity. This is embarrassing. This is Trinity Church Cemetery at Wall Street, New York. No? Ang dalan ani ubos na. Marag taga dinhi na cemetery kay nasa ubos ang daan. Masakara kayo, go into the church and then you visit. It's an old cemetery, early period of Manhattan, of New York. No? Mga 1700s, 1800s na mga burials. And I think na-appeal shooting sa usa ka salida. Maybe the Vinci Code or something, na-appeal ng Trinity Church of kaninga burial, kaninga cemetery. And then you have a Jewish cemetery in Warsaw, Poland, no? Which is now forested, no? Natubuan na forest. But tarong lang gihapon, gamay naman lang kayo mga Hudyo tingali sa Poland. And of course, in our very own, we have, of course, Palos Cemetery, which is now Sapaco Park. And if you notice, this is an early 1900s, 1901, 1902 stereoscope, stereo view, no, card. And this is the same view. I think this is, yeah, this is from one of the blogs. I forgot to acknowledge these blogs, but yeah, okay. So credit to the owner. And my own photographs of the Garland Underground Cemetery in Garland, Laguna, no? Which is a circular cemetery. And there's an underground cemetery here on this mortuario. And that's where you find the underground cemetery with crypts, no? Under beautiful azulejos, blue tiles, which were made in Spain, but which were also locally made in Cavite. So this must have been locally made, no, in Cavite, and also azulejos, blue tiles. Imagine in the 1970s, I mean, for the longest time, this was full of informal settlers. And then they were able to remove the informal settlers, resettle them elsewhere. And this was converted into, I think, yeah, Palos Cemetery was full of informal settlers. And then yeah, I think Imelda Marcos developed it into a park with an orchestra performing every Saturday or every Sunday. And there was even a TV show, if I remember, in the 80s and 90s, Concert at the Park, which was at Sapaco Park, you know, here at this area. There's a kiosk somewhere there where the would performances. Okay, so what are the heritage things of heritage that you will see in our cemeteries? Well, the first you should see is the portal of the Carita. No? Here it is, wala atop. No, this is, I think, 1912. This is the veteran cemetery here. This is cut from a postcard of the veteran cemetery dating to 1907, 1910s. And I think this was unroofed by the 1912 super typhoon, which struck right into Cebu City. No? Kasi naupo siya na natangtang iyang mga atop. But that is the portal. It's seen as looking at it from the back. Unfortunately, wala may heritage movement in the 80s and 70s. Doon ay duha ka structure nag-attach niya. And I don't know. Kaya this is under the Roman Catholic Church. No? So it's going to be difficult to remove this. These are, I think, the Familia Perez, and the other one is are from Dalaget, mga bahari, sa ito mga apelido ani. Basta mga Dalaget nga families na diri. And the design in itself of this one is artistically pleasing, no? Aesthetically pleasing. But it's attached to the Spanish wall, so medyo nakakuan siya, naka-block sa vista of the beautiful unta nga portal, but you can't remove that anymore. It's all part of the heritage niya. Lisod na tagtangon. Inside, if you turn to the left, there's a chapel actually. This was restored in 2013. I reported this to the National Historical Commission asked for a listing of mga guba nga mga structures kay they only knew of Manila man sila, they only knew of the basilica nga nahugno. So I listed so many, including ang monument ni Lapu-Lapu, Magellan, and this one. Ginrestore yun nila in 2015 or 16 after the earthquake. Kung nagibutangan lang machuka tiles. And there's even, I think that's a Catholic church na nagbutangan ng altar. But you find these details, no, on the other side, there are still crypts nga blanco, empty na. That's the office. I forgot to put that. On the other side of this building, there are crypts, so mga special nga mga lubong tingali ito sa unang panahon, no? Mga crypts nga naapadihas. Pero office na siya, so gi-block na ang crypt. Now, you go further, if you go to the back, okay, lusot ka kay gate man ang siya portal. Further, about maybe 200 meters, there is the burial plot of the Spanish residents of Cebu. It's maintained by the Asociación Benéfica Española de Cebu, as the Spaniards would pronounce it. Asociación Benéfica Española de Cebu, and was developed was started in 1914. No? Now, unfortunately, this sign is inside and on the side lang. So dili makita if you're not familiar with the place, you would not see this marker. That's the seal of the Spanish crown, no? You find this in Spanish flag, the seal of Castilla, Aragon, no? Which is in the Spanish flag, the coat of arms. And inside you find important residents of who were left behind, who did not go back to Spain or came back later during the American period and continued with their businesses. Mga nadiha ang mga Picornel, ang mga Irastorza, Moraza, no? And for a time, I would imagine mga Aboitis tingali, they kuha lang nila ilang mga burial plots and move them to Sen Park. But daghang pang nabilin din nga mga burials na importante. Like kini sila, these are aesthetics. So notable graves, ang iyang heritage value is aesthetic, no? Kanang lapieta nga naay cross, kining babae nga naghilak, nagsubo, no? O kining oriol nga marble nga ay for some reason giduwa-duaan sa mga tao diya nabuak, no? Kang Cornelio de Ilordi or Liordi falleció el 10 de noviembre de 1924 a los 54 años de edad. No, recuerdo de su esposa y hijos, remembrance from his wife and children, male. No, unya nabali. But you find at the bottom, Oriol, Manila, L, and Cebu. So there was the Oriol family which made many marble carvings and statues. Mga Oriol na nasa Iloilo, karon daghan. Had a shop there in Cebu. They would have made all these mga marbles, no? Carrara marble or marble from Romblon, i-carve para sa patay. Interesting ang mga uban, no? For example, kining marble sadni sa kang Manuel Moraza y Erastorza. Moraza Erastorza, no? Hard to read na ang iyang kuan, pero marble ni siya ang I think ang statue plus kining Gothic nga mga embellishments over cement or something, marble magini siya. Magani nagtindog pa, no? And it stands in front of an altar, so timing yun kayo. At the bottom are the bones of Manuel Moraza Erastorza. Katong ganiha, no? Aesthetic ni siya, no? Ang heritage niya is artistic. Kini siya, ang bottom ana, mao ni siya, kang Rosita Garcia Reminiana. 14 de Mayo de 1904 namatay na yan. Na taon 1904 namatay 1933, so bata gid kay mga 29 edad. Rogad por milos que me habéis amado y rogaré por vosotros se hayo gracia. Una namin misericordia, something. Pray for me, those or something like that, and I will pray for you. Or if I find grace and forgiveness or something like that. No, naputol. Ana, so wala ma-repaint o balik. Beautiful. Di nakakitag mga plots ngayon ani, no? Nga gastuan gyud ayo. Pinangga gyud kay ni siya. Na it represents, the emotion at the same time aesthetics. No, imagine mo gasto gyud kag semento para buhaton na ginana. And then you have, of course, sa kaning mga nangita. I remember sa Facebook friend, I forgot his name. Mga parente ni Antolin Frias, who was an Augustinian, who had 3 wives, I think. Unya was, and in the story now in that book, if you type it, he was a lawyer, famous lawyer, and he died in 1925. But nadia isa nasas nadia iyang burial plot. He wrote a lot of legal books, I think, or mga books on law or something like that. And this was quite famous in his time. Nga tulo lagi kaasawa, Agustinian nga friar before nga ning gawas. And the story taas man to ako nabasahan was that nag-ilog ni for a time kay murag gikuha iyang patayng lawas sa mga Agustinians, kay Agustinian magika for life bisag minyo naka unya until eventually ang istorya is nakuha gid tingali sa usa sa mga asawa baka or sa heirs. Unya gilubong din sa Spanish. So interesting story ni. This is not just aesthetics, this is historical, no? Now, if you go opposite that, pero gikural na karon because gi-separate man ning Carita in ang management with the Carita under the cathedral and the Carita under the Santo Rosario. It's the Carita under the cathedral that has informal settlers nga active sa ang SVD kaniadto or maybe now ang Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation. JPIC's SVD taking care of the informal settlers. And this section under sa Santo Rosario, wala ni siya mga settlers kaayo or na usa ka section niya nga na lack of yun, no? We explored this, we checked this with Father Joey Belsinia, the parish team pastor or team administrator, team ministry na sila sa Santo Rosario. Niya siya gi-assign ani to take care ani nga mga plots. And by history kana sa Father Joey, limpyo gid kay Buloon, limpyo gid ang Buloon Church. So you can imagine malimpyo gid ni eventually. No? Shout out to Father Joey Belsinia for cleaning Buloon Church and cleaning up and sprucing it up and cleaning the back. No? And I could imagine this would also be cleaned. This is the American Veterans Plot at Carita. No, it's very historical. The ones buried there are supposed to be only veterans of the American period, of veterans of the Philippine-American War and veterans of World War I, because there were a lot of American soldiers who fought in Europe. Some of them either came back to Cebu or settled in Cebu, married Cebuanas, and are buried there. You have the O'Keeffes, the Yorks, and so many others. There's even a nurse there that died in 1933, I think, or 31, one of those cholera epidemics, I think. Because we had these cholera epidemics 1909, 1903, 1909. 1901, 1903, 1909, 1911, 1915, until the 1930s, there was cholera epidemics. And some died of old age. No? There's and there are 2 canons there. No? There are 2 Spanish era or maybe American era canons there that are buried. No? Na old photos ani when this was restored in the 1970s by the children of those buried there. And unfortunately, because of the change in the economy, many of these Filipino Americans, went back to the States or sent their great-grandchildren to the US. And you have very few people left here na nag-carry sa American family name, ng mga Filipino. So the heirs and the great-great-great-grandchildren, dili na kayo sila kaila. But I know one, communicating with me si Louis nasa Australia karon ang iyang grandmother, I think, York, no? Na York diri nakalubong, Louis Caminero, who now lives in Australia. Palaila ko na siyang mom nga who's a granddaughter man tingali of one of the or the wife of York or iyang whatever tong story mo pa na mo mantiwas kay busy kay ko. But there's a York buried here, the mga O'Keeffe's niya. I met the O'Keeffe's in San Francisco, in California. And I told them, you have burial plots there. And they said, yes. Kaya mo Bisaya ang mga O'Keeffe dito sa Amerika. No? For some strange reason. Yan ang pag yun yung mga O'Keeffe na bilhin diri sa Cebu, as with so many others. So but we hope to work with the Archdiocesan Commission for Cultural Heritage of the Church is planning to work with the Santo Rosario Church and the heirs to spruce this up, maybe move some of the plots into one corner and remove the bones so that mahimo siyang park or something like that. It's still property of the Archdiocese, but it has reached a level of historical value in terms of heritage that it can't be touched anymore. It can't be altered except for aesthetic purposes, to clean it up. There's a section at Carita, which is very clean, walled off, that shows the future of Carita. No? It's under Santo Rosario section. There's a Santo Rosario office there. There's a chapel, and they call it semi-private. So all niches, but there's a park. There's a big cross nga mudagkot ka, and it's green and quiet, so far away. So wala siya informal settlers. This gives you an idea that if matarong lang og settle ang mga informal settlers, like tagaan sila kung sa ka-section nga, like say high-rise or whatever, sa Carita, and the rest will be cemeteries. Manindot yun siya. There's a possibility na mahimog ni siyang kanang safe place, no? For people to ponder. Kaya there are many people who go to cemeteries, not because they have relatives, but they want to, rest, to relax, to, and mao na purpose kitong tapon sa mga cemeteries. It's not just for the dead, but also for the living to breathe, to relax. Kay ninyo mo kayo ng mga cemetery. No? Now you go to the Imo side, the old Carita, makita nimo. And nalimpyo gid ang Doña Pepang Osmeña Mausoleum. Unlike in 2012 when I saw this, kuan siya murag rundown na ang grounds, but now it's taken care of, gilimpyo siya. It's like an oasis in the midst of so much dirt, no? And kuan baka ng ill planning, I don't know what's going on, but sayang kay pwede ta siya imong park together with the informal settlers. Tarunong lang ang mga balay sa informal settlers and himuon ni siya nga park. Ma-preserve ra gid siya. No, the dead can live side by side with this cemetery. They don't need to be removed. Tarungon lang nila mga houses there. Kaya na naman nagpuyo naman gyud sa ubang mga mausoleum ang uban. No, tarungon na lang tingali, no. But this is at the center, at the start of the old Carita. This was built in 1918. There are old photographs that show this beside the beach. Kay daplin manigdagat kaniadto niya na appeal sa reclamation. So daplin ginigdagat ang old Carita, which is typical of Minterio sa Spanish period. Daplin dagat kasi yun na ikaw ang yuta, kibalason. No? But this is unique. This is, a pantheon really ang design. Unya isulod nimo ang lungon na ng tunga. Unya inaog sa ubos niya. Nadiya ang tanang mga Osmeña, including I think, not the president, no, but maybe Sir Heng, the son, the mayor is probably there. If not married in the US. And all the other Osmeñas nga related to the mga anak ni Doña Pepang, the first wife of Don Sergio, who died young, no? Who died during childbirth. 1918 siya namatay. So this must have been constructed around that period for her. But Presidente Manceserio Osmeña, he's buried in the burial plot at the North Cemetery in Manila for presidents. Na siya dito, so nabuwag siya. Nga masang second wife mo dito man sa taga Manila man to. There's a beautiful Art Deco plot which has an neoclassical structure sa gawas, pero Art Deco ang lubong sa sulod. Sa mga Jerez, no? My grandfather on my father's side ang young mother was a Jerez also. So maybe related ni ani. Ang Jerez sa Cebu is famous for introducing the first ice plant, no? Diya atubangan sa carbon dapit ang ice plant, no? Used to be the first ice plant sa mga Jerez. So they were really rich, wealthy in the American period. And I think it's taken care of. For a time, gitabunan man yung scene, and then gitangtang ang scene. And now you can actually see the burial. It's made of marble. Nahulog lang ubang sections, but you can see the design, no? May mga Art Deco elements, no? And then sadly, you have a representation of Spanish period plots kini that you find sa Sapaco Park. Kural ni siya, so di tingnan ni papuyan. Ug American period nga mga plots nga gipanguha nas mga tag-iya, gipambalhin na ilang lubong nga maglisod na gid sila tungod sa kahugaw sa lugar na pay manok gabuhi inana. So daghang inana makita nimo sa old Carita. Murag gibiyaan kay once gi-donate ni sa Cebu City unya. Well, I don't know unsay priority sa Cebu City government for now. COVID man sad, so maglisod sa bubuhat og park, well nangitag lubnganan para sa unfortunate na namatay. But you find certain treasures here. Like for example, this marble marker, tomb marker from Marcelino Soto, no, who died young, no, who died at the age of he died in 1890. Mga parente ni nilang Vicente Soto, basi iyan yung parents. Unya ay papa, unya si Pascual Soto na asawa niya, Pascuala, namatay in 1904. Marble ni siya, and this is must be the work of the a good artist, no, and maybe Dante Guidetti, but I think Guidetti was not here at the time. But there are many works there by the Italian sculptor Dante Guidetti, and I cannot put the photographs anymore. Kay nalagi mga balay na mga manok na mga buwak na, so doesn't do justice to the plots mga na famous ang taang artist niya, wala siya mabantay, makuanan. Maybe a section of this can be. And then you have the huge tomb of Senator Manuel Mariano Jesus Cuenco, nagi letter CO. Pero gibalhin na ang ilang mga plots. Gibalhin na ang Senator Cuenco to nasa Sem Park man tingali ang mga Cuencos. But naa siya dako kayo. Pero dako kay atang kinigira baka imagine kanya na diya. Pero hugaw kayo yun in town yatiman. Luoy biya. And then you have, I think some are taking care of the burials. Kaya kaning kang Vicente Ralios, no, Guzman y Familia, mayor sa Cebu City kaniadto, kang Councilor Jose Nolasco, maamang pagka-tratar na i-caretaker ni siya. No? And it's both historical and aesthetic. Mayor bago niya ang usa konsehal. Unya si Jose Nolasco is famous for chairing the annual Cebu Carnival sa pre-war period. So historical ni nga plot kay naa diha usa ka importante nga tao related to the history of the Cebu Carnival, which was an annual event nga everybody looked forward to in this American period and up to the early post-war period. And Vicente Ralios owns many properties, no, and was mayor. And nindot sad ang iyang plot. Nindot ang mga aesthetic yun kaayo. Wala, hindi na makakitag mga lubong nga inaani karon. No? So they represent a distinct period. But look at the back, na ay katukod o balay. No? Very, very strange. And then you have all these abandoned or semi-abandoned nga mga plots, no? Nga notable architectural and aesthetic. Kini siya, wala ni gi-abandon, napay take care doon sa entrance. Naadari ang mausoleums ni Doña Pepang. Mao ni siya sa atbang niya, kini gi-abandon na. You know, this can still be repaired, repainted, kaniogi. Like a construction tingali, kaya may kini siya bantayan pa ni Purma o cross. No? So there's so many of these at the old Carita. And the promise, if you look at the map, it's marked Heritage Park because in the time of Mayor Mike, naamo giniplano himo Heritage Park, unya nabiyaan, no, napildis Mayor Mark ng Mike, ni policy, ng laing mayor, unya ang pagkuman na palik na sa si Mayor Edla, unya nag-COVID. So marag no, ano gini mabanday niya daghan na kaayong informal settlers until eventually mawa gid ni mahimo gid ning village sa mga informal settlers if di ni siya bantayan. Pangataan gid tingali na resettlement area somewhere here nga ang usa ka section kay nahawa naman ang uban, and then the rest will be turned into a park. Now, if you go further to Carita, padong Kababolo na nga section, padong Sipodromo, there is the Cebu the Chinese cemetery. It's also in a sorry state of preservation. No? And here's the portal. It's very Christian, but there's the Chinese mark. No? And that's the entrance. It in itself is aesthetic, historical, and architectural value. No? To the side of that, before you enter, actually, there are notable graves of a village, nga mga hometown villagers, and the Cantonese nga plaque. So meaning, hukyan lang naa sa sulod. Ang mga Cantonese, tuga Hong Kong, o Guangzhou, Guangdong, ana diya ilubong. And who are the Cantonese? Mga cooks, di ba? Maumana sila tigluto sa mga restaurants. Daghan sila mga parente actually ng mga Pilipino na may Bisaya na kayo. Nga ang ilang lolo sa lolo, Cantonese na cook na minyo, o Filipina, diri, unya, mga apo. Bisaya, nagkikaig mga apelido. Nawala na ang mga Catholic. Pero maadto pa sila, mudagkot na sila. So, gagmay na lang mga bone chambers na ilaha diya. Unya, so mga mga cooks kani adto, cook sa White Gold House, cook sa Bisayan restaurant, na diha tanan. So, it's very historic. Heritage, historic, and at the same time, aesthetic sad kay naam na slave murag altar diha nga that represents either the town or the period there. And as I mentioned earlier, at the center of the Chinese cemetery, north centro gyud sa north, east, west, north, south nga coordinates, you find at the center the burial plot of Benito Tan Onchuan. Sa ilalom sa tangtangon sa ning iyang epitaph about his life, tangtangon na kunay ilubong niya munaog sa ubos ang mga lubong. So nana sa ilawom na siya underground. That's Benito Tan Onchuan, who at one time was the president of the Asociación Benévola de Chinos de Cebu, the association, the charitable association of the Chinese Association of Cebu, kay mutabang sa mga insik nga naglisod or kung nasunugan mo na mutabang ang Benevola. It's still alive today. Tag-iya na sa Chongwa Hospital ang Benevola, I think. And they have many other charitable works. But sadly, wala bantay kaayo sa mga Onchuan ng iyahang. I do not understand why. No? The Onchuans are very wealthy until now, but maybe gibalhin na nila sa elsewhere. I think they moved the Onchuan plots elsewhere. So it's run down. It's going to seed. But my understanding is the Benevola wants this restored and met many times already with the informal settlers to find a way to settle them elsewhere para matarong na ni. Because there are many plots there that are still left behind. For example, Don Lucio Oy Herrera. No? Lucio Oy Herrera is of course the consul in the late Spanish period and the early American period. Financier, he helped finance the Katipuneros in the revolution, and was awarded by the the Republican Sun Yat-sen for services to the campaign to end the Chinese dynasty, the Mongol dynasty, the Qing dynasty, no? And the establishment of the Republic of China. And then you have the plot of Yap Anton. Kanina, abli na ni gibuak na ni siya, nadala na balina ang iyang plot elsewhere. But one of the great granddaughters has a kinder school or school that charitable school that she has held here when I inspected this 2 years ago. Na magklase diha mga bata. Murag part sa iyang charitable work sa usas mga apo. Anak sa apo sa ni Yap Anton. Yap Anton famous at na iyang famous hardware or non-grocery and all kinds of merchandise or businessman of the American period. Sikat kayo siya mga Yap. And then you have the burial plot of Lim Tian Ting here, I think. Usa sa pinakasikat nga mga insik nga negosyante kaniadto na ikauli mga barko pareha ni Yap Anton. Pero naikapuyo si babaw, gitukuran og building. Nya kini no, mga metal columns ba yan nga gisiminto sa ilaw niya. Corinthian man tingali ang iyang capitals. And then you have a cleaner section behind the unsuan octagon, paakwa. Tiled na siya nga color niya. Limpyo gyud kaayo. Ang kang donya modesta og iyang bana, no? Nga sayo namatay Henry C. Batingan. Silang duha unya sa luyo na kang Gotchan, Don Felix Gotchan, the most famous Chinese realtor, real estate developer mo, first nag-develop og mga subdivisions sa Cebu, I think. And then near that is the burial plot sa octagon shape of Don Manuel Gotianoy, no? And his wife Doña Alicia, and his first wife na namatay sayo na diri sa kilid. And then you of course Don Felix Gotchan, no? And then you have at the borders you have nananidool sa Queen City ang Ludo and Luim burial plots kang Cayetano Ludo, Paterno Luim, all that na diha. And then kang ang Gothong na plot, no? Gothong na plot, which must have a symbolic meaning, maybe Buddhistic Messiah or something. Okay, it's a very strange building, but it's in itself is a heritage structure, no? And then the inside, that's inside. Allow me to picture ni Don Carlos or iyang wife during ni sa Kalagkalag. And then kang sa amigo nako, lolo sa amigo nato si Frederick Ong, yung lolo Ong King, yung wife. And then the epitaph of their life. And then this one I was told is related to the Benedictos or the owners of B Hotel, and this one also, which you can find kung nakasadalan tumabolo kaning pagoda nga edge na ana makita nimo. No, daghan ni silang mga inani nga plots which are still taken care of inside the cemetery. Now in San Remigio, as I mentioned earlier, there's jar burial practice 1,000 years ago, or maybe 500, 600 years ago. There's also a practice called columna up north, San Remigio, Bongo, Tabuelan, nga ang mga lubong sad nga kwaon na after 5 years, ilang buhatag balay-balay. Di nila ipalabay or ibutang sa dakong cross as the practice would be. And they're called columna because if you notice, kanis post sa akong friend nga si Attorney Troy Felipe, no? Nga sa taga-Tabuelan, kuno sa Tabuelan, kuno nasa di nga practice, no? So I think sa Oliva ni nga minteryo niya. Makita nimo ilang balayan unya. Mo na tawag columna kay there's a post, there's a column on it's raised. No, after 5 years kwaon man ang mga plot na isudlain or mamatyan mo, and then you need to put in another. You have this practice, which is secondary burial practice, which is very ancient, to taking care of the bones of your dead, not just throwing them together with so many others, but buhatan kini mo special nga location. This is really amazing, and it's worth a scholarly paper. No, someone should write maybe, and do research. So to conclude, this talk is becoming very long now. What is to be done? I think we need to do research and documentation before anything else. No, document all this heritage, these plots and cemeteries, these individual plots with heritage value. Find out what their values are: historic, aesthetic, natural, whatever. And then, after research and documentation, find a way to resettle and find housing for informal settlers living there. They could be resettled on the same site. Maybe put up a high-rise buildings where the city government can afford that. Well, they will be the ones to enjoy the park. No, in Singapore, that's what they do. They put a lot of condominium houses, public housing, and then there's always a park that connects all the houses around the high-rise. Maybe that can be done, no? Because the problem with resettlement, dili mo resettle ang mga informal settlers. Kaya kung dadun man sa layo kay to as kabukiran unya mo gina ila reklamo nga. Unsa man nila pagpanginabuhi nga ila panginabuhi, mamligya, whatever niya. Tuwa naman noon sila giyo kayo. I think maybe a section of these cemeteries can be developed into high-rise resettlement. Nga models of high-rise resettlement, mga 10 stories, 20 stories nga ana diya ang mga informal settlers. Or whatever, no? Because turn this into a park. No, that's just my suggestion. Or maybe you could really move people elsewhere or identify housing elsewhere now. Kaya di naman mo work good ang horizontal resettlement for Cebu City. Mabukid na gina kung horizontal resettlement. I think the city should explore vertical resettlement, mid-rise housing. Nga gamay ra occupy nga yuta, daghan ang makapuyo kay pasakaman ang building, no? ang residences rather than spread them out, occupying one plot nga usaray ka puyo. Better build, no? Mid-rise structures to house so many people, and then convert them into heritage parks, like the best example, Palos Cemetery. Okay, so that ends my presentation. Now, this is a recorded presentation because I must apologize because there's a personal event that I have to attend to, birthday of my sister up north. So if you have questions or comments, I will be answering from there, later. So thank you very much, and I hope you learned something from the presentation.
Thank you very much, Sir Jobers. I know you mentioned that you are actually in the north now, and I don't know if the signal is working. I don't see Sir Jobers yet, but we'd like to thank Sir Jobers for taking the time to really accept, no, despite the accept our invitation, even if he had a personal event or affair to attend to, and um, it's a very interesting talk that Sir Jober shared this afternoon, especially because I am now looking at cemeteries in a different light. Um, people have this thing with cemeteries, no, and with the macabre. But it seems that we have cemeteries. We're now looking at cemeteries in a new light this time. That we can learn so much from cemeteries, and they could even be places where, according to Sir Jobers, cemeteries are not just places for the dead, but also places for the living to breathe. No, and but interestingly, it's also a place where we can learn. It's very educational. It's like as if we are when Sir Jobers Sir Jobers was like telling us whose mausoleum this is, who's buried in here in this place. It's like we are on a tour to the past, no? So we're trying to connect with Sir Jobers. Okay, we could, because of the signal, we can still actually accommodate your questions, but we're going to be working through phone patch with Sir Jobers. Nevertheless, sir, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
So, but can Sir Jobers be heard over or on the air? Yes, great. Thank you, Sir Jobers. Sir, we're ready to accommodate questions from our audience. And in between, we're going to just pause a little bit and see if we can also fit in our trivia just to give you space to breathe as well. So let's have our first question. This comes from Vince Joaquino. Thank you very much for your question. I'm sorry, I don't know if this is in the volume is maxed. I cannot. Sorry, sir, because this is my phone. But anyway, if you can just hear me, sir. He says, "Good afternoon. What made the churches in some of the towns in Cebu province significant, where they literally bury the dead on the church floor? Was this also practiced, especially in Cebu City during the Spanish era? And where pagan and non-Catholic Cebuanos buried in Catholic cemeteries?" I think he's referring to the Spanish era as well, sir.
Okay. This is part of the subject of my doctoral dissertation, where I studied the practices of Maya Catholics in Central America. In the early mission period, they did bury their dead on the floors of the church. But I'm not sure. There's no evidence of because we're not allowed to excavate on inside churches. So we do not know if there are people buried on the church floors. But you have to understand that the oldest church in Cebu, for example, the Basilica, if there are people buried there, they will probably be friars or holy members of the clergy. There's in Argao, I think, and Mother Jacel, I think, is buried on the floors of near the sacristy of Argao. And so that's a practice, but and that was allowed. I mean, that was allowed in the early Christian Catholic period. Now, were pagans buried? No, I don't think so. You would not be buried if you don't believe in Christianity or Catholicism. Did you get that?
Yeah, most definitely, sir. I don't think pagans will be buried there. And then, if I even could remember properly, sir, if I could remember well, they have to go through also the Catholic rituals, so the rites, and then if they were not
Even Masons were not allowed to be
exactly
buried. Even Catholic Masons had to renounce Masonry. There's the controversial so-called retraction of Rizal, for example, because Rizal was a Mason and all those things, which became a kind of controversy because it was a big retraction. So that's really an issue, Masonry, and that's not even a religion. How much more if you are a non-believer? But the practice of burying the dead on the floors of the church was allowed for a time all over Christianity, the Christian world. So I don't think it would be not be allowed in early churches. You would probably find some of them buried on the ground. Now, many of these churches have been renovated in the 1800s and 1900s. They were replaced with machuca tiles and all that stuff. We would not know anymore who are buried under. Now, there is a way to do that. It's called proton magnetometer, but you will have to open the floors, the cement, to use a magnetometer.
yes. Maybe, sir, the next, how do you call this? We will just leave the dead in peace.
Where they are. In peace, yes, correct.
Sir, but I have I hope we answered Vince's question, but sir, this is because you mentioned a while ago that it is even possible you said the old churches probably have dead buried on their floors or maybe in the walls. I'm wondering about the churches that were demolished, especially in like the Parian church, sir, no? So what happened to, or are we stepping on the dead when we go to the Parian fire station now, or what happened to the dead? Would they have also relocated the remains before they demolished?
I stand corrected. The Parian fire station is where the convent was located. The church is right to the right if you're facing the Parian church fire station. The church was to its right. So a section of that is the basketball court. I actually wrote the late Mayor Labelia, God rest his soul, he had his drinking man today. I actually wrote him about 3 or 4 years ago, requesting the possibility of excavating that basketball court. My understanding is that when that monument, heritage monument, was excavated, so many burials were found with ceramics buried with them. So that's a mixture of indigenous and Catholic practices. So there's a possibility that the basketball court across Parian Barangay Station, fire station, would have burials, and they'd be part of the church, the grounds. And then there's a fireman's house at the back. I think it's still there, which is part of that and all that. And they said that when drainage was dug there, they found bolts, and that's already on the church floor itself. That's already where the old church floor of the Parian church would have been. So that's a very early church, 1600s na po. Secular church run by the seculars, by Chinese na mga bisnis of Chinese nga, mga pari sa Garland. So that it's not unthinkable that you would find burials on the former church floor, where the Church of Parian used to stand.
Sir, what happened to your letter to the late Mayor Labelia? What was the response?
The late Mayor Labelia turned it down. did not allow. It would have been costly also on our part. I would have to spend repaving the basketball court, because that's what you do when you excavate.
Yeah.
But it's interesting really, because that's the only section that's still from an old church, and probably from the early Chinese settlement there of the early Spanish period. So you probably find a lot of Chinese, symbols there of Christianized Chinese. Probably ivory ng mga rosaries, mga inana.
Wow.
That's a possibility, yeah.
That would have been also very interesting, sir, if the, the excavation would have been granted permission. Anyway, thank you, sir, for that first question, for answering that first question. We now go to our next question. And this is the next question, sir, from Junie Lee Arthur 111. Is there a specific reason documented in folklore, or, for example, why our ancestors practiced secondary burial?
There is a lot of material archaeologically and anthropologically from other cultures about secondary burial practice, and it had to do with preparing the dead to travel to the next world. I am not sure if there is folklore about that in Philippine sources, but it's well documented among Southeast Asian peoples, that the cleaning of the bones and applying, for example, red ochre to enliven the bone, as if it still had blood, was to enliven it so that it could travel into the next world. That the spirit could travel to the next world. So the secondary burial practice was returning, for example, your dead back to life, and they travel to the next world. It's also about taking care of the bones of your dead, bringing them back home, the physical remains of the dead, because the soul, the kalag, would go elsewhere. Now, we have a concept called kalag, and that's not Spanish. That's really indigenous, and that shows that we already had a concept of the soul even before the Spaniards arrived, because the Spaniards did not coin that word for us. It was already in existence in the early Spanish dictionaries that were compiled by, for example, Mateo Sanchez in 1800. The word kalag. So we must have had a concept of some spirit leaving the body and the physical left behind, to be taken care of by the ones who are living. So it's a way also taking care of the dead, removing the bones. Now in Christianity, we are told that the body left behind is of no worth. So that is why every 5 years you remove the body and it can be thrown away. The bones. But for some reason, the people in San Remigio still take care of the bones of the dead. They still revere them. It has to do with the pre-colonial practice of ancestral worship. That if we don't take care of the bones of our dead, Pimalas, your concepts is down when you have so many events in your life that are bad. If you go to America or Mananampal, they will say, there's something in your ancestry, something in your past that happened or something, or that you didn't take care of your dead relatives or something like that. So maybe that kind of fear also, na magabaan ta because paano ito kantay ang kabilin sa atong mga pagikan na namatay na. So, I think.
Oops. Sorry, we were cut off, but we'll try to bring back Sir Jobers. Before we will let him continue his answer for our second question, but while we're trying to get Sir Jobers back, maybe we can flash the trivia. Let's have our first trivia. Fast fingers, please. Again, this is our trivia number 1. We have 5 trivias actually coming up, or 4 more actually coming up. What is the Cebuano pre-colonial burial place called? Fast fingers, the first one to write on the comment section there, the correct answer wins a prize. Okay, let's give you time for that. We're also trying to reach Sir Jobers. Okay, I hope we have a question. I'm also trying to bring in Sir Jobers. Are you? Let's see. He's busy. Okay. Okay. Um, Woo, wow. We right away have our first trivia winner. And it's, is this the official? Okay. Sorry for that. I know because it's actually also beginning to rain here from where we are in the city. And um, all the more there in Daan Bantayan where Sir Jobers is now. Sir, are you back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, sorry. Sir, we were talking about our beliefs in the afterlife, and that's the reason why we take care actually of the remains of our dead loved ones. Uh, did I miss anything, sir? Would you like to continue? Is there something that you would like to say
Well,
more?
no, I think it's just that we take care of that. But the Christian belief is that I think like the 5 years, the bones are removed and put into a common grave. That's the difference. Instead of bringing back home the remains of the dead. In fact, Catholicism does not allow remains to be brought to the house. They should be brought to a sanctified burial. Instead of bringing them to your house. So that's a difference in Catholicism, I think, and the colonial practice.
Correct,
Of
sir.
bringing the bones to your house. Yeah.
Yeah. They have to be blessed and placed in a sacred place or sacred ground.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's for our second question, Sir Jobers. We actually had our first trivia because, while we're waiting for you to come back, sir. Our first trivia winner, by the way, is CM Kui. Don't worry, we are going to be, we'll try to, or rather, my teammates are going to be trying to reach out to you so that they can tell you how you can claim your prize. Thank you very much. Sir, let's go to our next question. We have actually several questions. This is a very interesting talk indeed. Here's our third question. Actually, from the winner himself, he has submitted already also a question, CM Kui. This is his question, sir. Hello, sir. I remember that there is a bangka coffin displayed in Museo Subo. I was wondering how was it used? How was it used? Was it buried or was it sailed in water since it was fashioned similar to a bangka? I would also like to ask sir if you would know when the concept of the mausoleum was introduced here in Cebu in the Philippines. That's the two questions there, sir.
The boat coffin at Proseso will come from Katmon. The boat coffin at USA Museum come from Bohol. Also, it shows the pervasiveness of the process of boat coffins. They were not used for floating the dead. They're just used to contain dead. They are buried on the ground. Yung na bones, that's wow na peso after a few years. When you're ready to do the feast, na magasto kayo, ilaw, and then niptuhan ang bones, and then they put coffins. But they're not to be floated. They're brought to your house, or usually to a cave, where they would travel to the next one. That's the belief. The kalag would travel on a boat to the edge of the horizon. So, symbolic na ang reason na ang boat. Symbolic ang iyang shape na to travel to the next world. Now, the second question, when did the concept of mausoleums start? I think it started in the late Spanish period when the natives had enough money to afford mausoleums. The Spaniards were the first, of course, to put up mausoleums for their dead. And the natives followed afterwards. So, American period, when there was already a strong middle class of natives, they also went into mausoleum. But the practice of mausoleum is quite long. The word mausoleo is a very old term. I think it's Greek, so it must have been, or Latin. Must have been practiced for a long, long time. But for the Philippines, you put up a mausoleum because you can afford. So it has to do with economic needs. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, hi.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I'm still here. Yeah. Thank you, sir, for answering that question. I hope our CM Kui, who gave the question, actually also has heard the answer to the question and you're satisfied with the answer. If you have more questions, just please send them to our comment section so we can give them to Sir Jobers. Let's have our next question. Then we'll have another, our second trivia after. This question comes from Fe Villanueva Tafalia. Sir Joe Bercy, she asks, was there a standard structural design for tombs during the Spanish period and the American period?
Okay, now that is a very important question. In archaeology, we know this is called typological foundation. In the United States, there was a study done in New England on the lines of mausoleum, of tombstones, and then it was proven that every 30 years, so generational, mo change ang design sa tombstones na angel ang ibabaw. Then munaog sa bottom ang angel, o puputang sa tunga ka ng carved from sa tombstone. No? Now, I think the architectural movement, the design movement, affected the design of tombstones, and they would have been affected also by what was acceptable design in Europe and the United States. So, Spanish period, of course, the measurements would have been exactly like kanang nitso. Katong ipakita na ko kaniya sa Sapaco Park, no? Mga nitso ra ang sa Cebu, mga natives, mga nitso. And then all the others could not afford a nitso ilubong sa ground, no? Mga crossland. Later naman na American period, later into the late post-war period naman ang mga nagkong mausoleum. So there were regulations on the sizes of burial plots and the cross had to be put up, had to be put there. Now, kanang American period, nagkawas na ng mga later period na lain ang mga design. No? 1930s, nagkawas na ng mausoleum, kaning Cemeteries, for example. And you have already a company like Oriol that made all these marble tombstones, tomb markers. And then Dante Gabii, the Italian, came from Italy and eventually settled in Singapore, I think, but lived here for a time. Created all these statues. It was the trend apparently in the 1920s and 30s especially to put a plaqueta or an angel or something like that made of cement or marble if you could afford it on a tomb that's above the ground. No? So kanang mga above ground tombs came out later in the American period. You know, I don't think above ground tombs, well, except for niches in the Spanish period, in the late Spanish period. And the reason for that is has to do with embalming. Yung Balsamar was not, well, mahal ang embalming in the late Spanish period. Even in throughout the Spanish period, the embalming technology was expensive because of formalin. But in the American period, it was easier to I mean, not easier, but at least kuna na mo embalm in many places, no? And so you could bury your dead above the ground. Bumahubaya kung above the ground o niya wala maipagsaman. So the tombstones nga above ground had to have been allowed only after the embalming technology arrived, at least in urban areas, in town, in urban areas. Or tulay ka ng, like, isang karon, may mga tao mo imbalsamar sa sulod sa balay. No? Kung hindi ka ganahan na doon sa morgue or something, kana o di ka ka-afford. No? At doon sa balay, imbalsamar doon may mga ikakakadungog ko, mga licensed embalmers. Morbid ka ay paminaon, pero kung di ka ka-afford, manggod sa punerarya at doon sa balay. Lubong na yun. So embalming had to do with the tombstones na above the ground. So also with the mausoleum. So yeah, the design on them had to do with the movements of mga kay Art Deco nga design during the Art Deco movement of 1900 to 1930s, no, side by side with Art Nouveau na mga floral garlands, mga itananan. And then, of course, the standard na makita sa mga lubuhin din natin now, kanang may angel, seraphim or cherubim, no, or a full body na kaning angel. Depende sa kung naay ubuhat. Now, Today, I think na wala kamay talaga yung buwan na, no? Nasa liloan o nasa konsolasyon. Pero nagian na ko kahapon, di man mga anghel ang iwan. Mga kolumna, mga decoration, mga garden. Sa balay. So, wala na kita nga rin ang technology. Kasi sa una naman as company, in my younger days, my 1970s, I used to pass by company. Doon na may tipuhat niya ng mga anghel kong semento. Na magtungo, ito magtungo. Sa lubong, magtungo, mag-look down on the tomb. Nga na siya sa head nga part. Pero wala na may bubuhatan. Di naman na yun. Di mo na mamulti. No? Naman ay kapilya o yan. Simintuon, paspas kayo. Wala ko kita isa. It's a lost art already ka nang bubuhatan. No? So, mo nang na simple sa mga lubong karon. May parato ang granite gigan sa China, kasagarang dato sa Sen Park sa Golden Haven, mo na mga granite ibutang o mga stone na polish. No? O niya, tombstone na rin na ingala na quote from the Bible. Mo naman yung nauso karon. Wala na mga anghel, wala na mga Yesu Cristo. Retrato na sa patay, yan ay quote from the Bible. And so we see this change going happening also. Nagkanang kakuripot ng mga tao nila kung anghel ka na kung kayo. And that will cost about 50,000 ba yan? Or maybe 30,000 to make a huge change today.
Sir, is there like a study on this? Sir, interesting to find out about the symbolisms and then the changes in the aesthetics. You mentioned that, sir, and why there were changes, no? That's a very interesting study tingali to make.
There's a study by my colleague at UP Archaeological Studies Program on Cemetery at Pantheon by Dr. Grace Barreto. So designs by but for Cebu, I know only the study of Kyo Mihara of the Osaka Technological University. So he studied the Chinese cemetery, but what he studied was not artistic or aesthetic. He was looking at all the family names and where they came from. So he got his statistics na pinakadako na apelido sa mga dubong sa Chinese cemetery. Mga ko, and then na itan, and then niya, mga inala niya, asa nga tao, swanso, ay nana.
Oh, we got cut off again. So, but I think it's time for our next trivia. Let's have our trivia number 2. While we're trying to bring in back Sir Jobers. Fast fingers, blank means sacred ground for the dead in churches, and this is during the pre-1789 Spanish colonial period. What I think we're looking for the term, no, because this would mean sacred ground for the dead in churches during the pre-1789 Spanish colonial period. Because what happened after 1789 was that burial. Our dead were now buried away, 1 kilometer away from the church for sanitary purposes, and so there was like. They were now buried not anymore in churches, but in a separate space 1 kilometer away from the churches. And we're looking for the term. I think it's Spanish, no? It's a Spanish term. Anyway, while we're trying to bring in Sir Jobers back, and he's back, sir?
Actually, my signal is strong now. You're coming in, so I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. So we can...
Can you put it up on screen?
Okay, sige. For a bit, sir. While we're working on that, yes, Sir Jobers is back finally. And we can see Kandaya from here, sir.
I can't hear you. Okay, hello? Okay,
yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Coming in clear?
You're in, but can you hear me, sir?
But I can't hear you.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
I can't hear you.
Oh, maybe we have to bring Sir Jobers back through a phone patch. But sir, it's okay. We can see you. Don't switch off your video cam. We'll just go talk through phone patch so that you can hear me. Okay?
I can't hear Heidi, Miss Heidi, but if you can hear me and you post a question there, I can
okay.
answer.
Sir, we're calling you.
Okay. Sige, hello?
Yeah, don't switch off your video cam, sir. Sir, we were talking, you were trying to finish answering the last question.
Oh yeah, okay. Kyomi Harada, the Japanese who studied the Chinese cemetery in terms of family names, niya asa sila. The study on aesthetics for all the cemeteries in Cebu will have to be done by office.
Correct ko ato, sir. I was about
It's an easy study. You need only a man, very cheap run as well. But it's to run the tanan niya. Ikuha na kita kita ang lang pattern niya. It can be good to apply statistics to look at date of death o niya ang mga design. Especially ka lang sa mga tombstones na nasa buong sa kartal na church. They used to be on the menteryo. Nga pagkuha sa mga bukog, butang ang tombstone sa mga buong sa kartal. And ma-change ni mo ka ng DOM o ka ng RIP o ka makita ni mo ang kausapan niya PSK, pahulay sa kalinaw, kinana. So, depende rin yun. Nindot na siyang study. Kaya tagal mo palit anak ng libro ito. Ang lapid yun ang iya nga mo pabisan.
Actually, sir, mo suggest ko usa sa imong estudyante ang imong pasuwaton, ana.
Yeah. Or maybe they assigned it because like Dr. Grace Barreto actually asked the students to study cemeteries in Luzon, in Manila. And they published it.
That would be very interesting, good sir. I'd buy the book also, sir. Anyway, let's go to our next question. We also have our second winner, actually, for our trivia. And our winner is Junli Arthur, right? 111. So you got the correct answer, and the answer is Campo Santo. Congratulations. But this is the second question. This comes from, we know her. Shang Bacalso Cabanes. This is Masi. Murag uban maninimo dito, sir, while naglaag-laag mo dito sa Carita. Anyway. Nagutana siya, sir, mo niyang pangutana. The city cemeteries you presented have very beautiful works of art, worth preserving and conserving. What can you suggest to improve the area at the same time retain the community living around it? Do you think there is still a chance to involve the community in taking care of the area?
This is a very good question, and this comes from someone who is familiar with community participatory
community work, yeah.
Cultural mapping. No? And I think, yes, pwede mo ma-involve, especially young people, to help document all of this and then take care of them. The community around Old Carita, for example, is very important. So is the community also. In the so-called new, Sapaco Park. No? Because when we went there, you told me, amigo sa kabatang members sa informal settlement, siya yung guide na mo, informing ito niya. Wala ang siya kalit, so may kabayan niya. But eventually, I would imagine the best way to do that would be that when it's turned into an attraction ng mga locals, may nag-document, may maka-istorya, kanilikuan ka na kanaan, they will earn from it, they will appreciate it. Kaya ang problema ng sa heritage is people cannot appreciate it if they don't value it. So you have to teach them how to value it. And that from themselves, makuha sila mga souvenir baka diyan or that locals, that tourists can then buy from them so that they will feel na napagiti ay kay makuha sa inaning heritage. No? Okay, well, whether we like it or not, the informal settlers need money and need support. They need to eat every day. And if they don't feel nga, saan mo ito i-document, di ba tama, mayroon ka ng typical expression, di ba tama dato ani, di ba tama puso. So probably a good way to do that is community participation, and then hindi mo siyang tourist attraction na lipiwan nila so that they would take care of the heritage. As we know na, kung di mo take care of tao, they don't see any value in it. Sabi na, kahit to ka, ibo kinamugin. Ano pater ang hil nga estatuwa diya, di magkatapak, di mamuhatag kung pagkaon ng amin. So, pwede yun ang community, but the community must also be encouraged to appreciate, to value. And then, hindi mo ulit ang attraction ng mga safe sa siya for people to go in and to learn. Kaya yung mga tao handa ang mga part. When I saw, for example, the Santo Rosario section, nga lingaw kay limpyo kayo. Limpyuhan sa mga pare sa Santo Rosario, may sa affection diyan. Sa Carita ka ng grabe mga tunga mga tao. Mag-meditate, mag-ampo, kaya na may kapilya sa kakukayo, na may kakukos. Vertical limpyo, which I showed it earlier. And so there is still hope. There is a way to once the heritage park, the so-called Carita Heritage Park is cleaned, nga mga locals will be taught to appreciate it. And they will document it. Sakto na ang resulta ni siyang makalso nga ang pangutana. Makatabang yun sila.
Sir Jobers, but do we remember that there was that decree to put our dead, no, muragihipo sila away from where people are populated na place where people were living. But we now have cemeteries in the middle of the cities where you have even condominiums around. We have also the informal settlers all living really close, in fact on top even of the nichos, no. But so there is no truth actually to the problem of sanitation when
Atong ordinances were before Imbalsamar was invented, before formalin and the kind of mga disinfectants for the dead were invented, were offered. So atong mga ordinances sa Spanish period, ito away na to because once may Imbalsamar ang patay, limpyo na makita na wala man ay kagaw. No? Even ako kailang atong tumingo magiging nga actually, once may Imbalsamar ang pasyente nga COVID, wala nang kita siya. If ako matay, no, wala kita siya. Wala nga ito lang hatlong ka ang possibilities of contamination sa movement. Those are for COVID patients. Mo nang iba, remain na lang yun. Pero for all intents and purposes, mo na ang mga material within the settlement is, una mo gud ang material, yung mga tao ning sunod. So maglisod ka nga, ang material ay mo i-blame, o ato i-blame ka. Ngay palayo na lang yun, kita po kung nagtao din. Ang mga tao, ganito, ang city ni expand to the areas of the cemetery. Pero sa ito ng cemetery, kaya na-formalin ba na nakasambalsamar mo ng mga patay. Unya na, actually, ang Department of Health, nag-monitor kita sa tanang mga punerarya. Remember ka ito na sa kakaso tungkol sa punerarya pag-ulang. Na nakita nga ng mga patayang lawas na wala pa may balsamar. Ibang tao, mga freezer, ang chest freezer. I-rape yan ito. Pasirabi yan ito. Violation ito siya sa health code. So doon ay health code na palayo sa paglubong. No? So safe again na. Kanang istorya lang ha, kung ilubong sa ground, o mo ato sa groundwater. Now, di ko katubagan na. Actually, if you notice, ang Carita, doon kay DOH sa city ka.
no, tinuod sir.
Wala ka rin mo. So, kung ang city nagatabay na diha, sigurado kita nga kanang natubong sa ground ng mga patay, ang ilang balsamar, ilang mga morbid na tingin discussion, ilang mga kuhan, decompose mo na, magpasa mo na sa ground. Mainom. So, I don't know, it's up to city how to answer that. But I'm sure, ang sayot kit is ang city, ni-encroach into this area nga dahil mga dahil patay. So, safe na kit tingali. No? Safe na kit natin. Nagkami na mo yung kit karoon sa materiality ko.
My next question, sir, ba? Okay na, sanitation-wise, okay. But nano ka, sir, no, nga there are people now who feel squeamish, tingali, going to the cemeteries, when in fact, you can actually just go, manghilabot tingali, of course, probably the living is the one nga manghilabot yun.
Yeah, I think it's the fear of death and the fear of the dead. In Asia, no? If you look at all the ghost stories created across continents, the most frightening are Asian ghost stories. No, kasi naman Netflix na mga series diyan natin sa Amazon Prime or kung saan ng mga kwan. Ang kanang Japanese, Thai, Filipino, o Indonesian na mga ghost stories ang pinagkahandlukan yun. Because I think mas imaginative po tao mga ghost stories and because of our experience of mga stories told to us. So it's the fear of the dead and fear of death that guides us. Kasi sabi ka ng mag-excavate, hindi ka mamutan ako sa among lubong na, hindi makaaka ng Macau, hindi makakita ka labirat. Uy, hindi mo mahadlok doon. Hindi mo mahadlok ka na, alaw ni mga tiguang. Pero mo doon, hindi naman ni Maho. So, lagi may morbid fear ang mga tao. Hindi mo nang sa archaeology, ang mga first time na po ng mga estudyante makikita ka labira mo, kitang klaro. Ethically pa kita mo. Kung kay kung dili kita na mo fukson nga muna ako sa excavation unit nga na ikalapira kay kung may ako gusto niya kung yan huli niya sila malay mag-nervous breakdown niya ako ito sa ngila so lagi tayo innate fear but when you see nga Catholic artwork I mean if you go to the Vatican for example museum in Rome doon na ginawa sa kaseksyon nga puro gid mo sa tikat sa mga interior ng mga sculpture in fact pagsuod gid mo sa Vatican Museum the first exhibit you see after going through the spiral pataas is our sarcophagi or sarcophagos mga stone na mga tombs na isulda ang patay niya napunan lang ang bato na nakakarve na yung early Christian na mga sarcophagos na made of marble and so grabe ang artwork yun sa cemetery it's just kung saan pag limpyo siya ma-appreciate now in Singapore doon ay Armenian Church wapo kayo pagka-display ang mga tombstones sa likod nito greenery niya wala akong plano sa Veterans Association of the American Veterans na flag doon ay mga descendants na nga giduol karon kung sugot pa silang limpyuhan karon ay hirog ang mga flag niya kauto na pag lubong niya ibang very sa pamilya niya may mo siyang murag part na ang mga flags and let's see if people will appreciate kung ano bigla po mga tao na ikaroon wag kita mo buhat kung mahal ka mga tao besides adlaw na ko ang kamagto di man gabi
Bitaw.
diba? Kana but then we will try gabi sa Kabilin we will include
Cemeteries. Okay. Naputol na sa sir. Sorry. But that is a very interesting thought, Sir Joe Burskay. Can you just, I don't know, it's like, yeah, no, we're now really coexisting with the dead. And then at the same time, we're trying to bring you back, sir. So, sorry. But it's interesting katong imong gisulti, sir, nga mahimong parks. We really badly need parks biya sa gyudron, sir, ha? With the congestion going on in the city. We really need spaces where we can also just sit down, like parks, no, and enjoy. But that's the only thing, sir. We have to consider whether sugot makaning tao nga naglingkod-lingkod sila niya, tupad nila koan na gilubong diha, no? So I think that's a very interesting koan, though, thought. While we're trying to bring Sir Jobers back, sir, can you hear me? Wala, no? So we'll call you again. But while we're trying to bring Sir Jobers back,
Okay.
okay, there you go.
Pero may signal na ba yan? Pero sige lang, contact na ba? Sige.
Okay. So I was saying, sir, nga interesting kay ito nga thought nga maglingkod-lingkod ka diha kay we need parks ba gyud karon kay wala tay mga parks kaayo. Unya tupad nimo kay nay gilubong diha, no?
Yeah. Let's try to include that sa GSK next time. American Veterans Club. Let's see how many sikaan mo yun.
Let's work it out with them. That's a very interesting thought, sir. I don't know, kaya na ba ka na next year? Maybe when we're really kanang fully sir. Okay, no, to open spaces. Okay. Let's have one more question, and before we go to our third trivia, I think naapatay mga several questions left. Let's have the next question for Sir Jobers. This is from Carol Banogon Boris. Thank you for your question. Sorry, I cannot see the. How is this? It's not fair.
Would be
Ready for a condominium type of cemetery, sir, like a 4-story building of all mausoleums or tombs. It's present in other countries now.
It's there already in the Carita. There's a 3-story or 4-story building with so many bones already put there. Bone chambers na siya na may mga nakalitang mga gagmay lang siya na mix. But it's already there at Carita, 3 stories na. And I think sa St. Peter, na doon ay private na company nag-set up of Columbali na magpapat ka stories na para sa cremated na remain. And then sanctified ground na piyari, ipitahan na piyari na rather than bring the ashes to your house. So, are we ready for that? They will be forced to do that because of the lack of space. No. Eventually, no, and it's happening now in Carita.
But this is only for bones, sir, no, but not for really kanang koan yun.
Naasad sa
newly dead.
Katong sa Santo Rosario, na ipata iko do patanon no tao ya or kanang teenager pa ko yung kapuhan. Yagdan siya kay marag 5 na ka-layers ang nitso, no? Kung nga, di mo nang mama siya yung mama. Dako man, so klaro kaya, lungon ang sunod. Dahil lungon sa sunod niya. Pero, ika-5 na o ika-4 na layer, so nagagda na siya.
So naanag yun
So,
sir.
it's going on in Santo Rosario yan. Pero, lungon lagi ka na, magkikalag-kalag niya. Puno, let's say, kaya mga 3,000 manika nakanitso, mga lungon. Mag-abot ang tanan, times 4 katao kada nitso. So, you're talking 12,000. Hindi to kasi kinaipot mo. Mag-ilog mo hagdanan mo, pinatiyan na hindi po na hagdanan na. So, most na ang problema niya. Kung saan na nito, naghan tayo.
Sir, we never had, this is my question now, sir, because it came to me lang yun kay, mulagi ka ng dagko na pwede na din ng mga lawas diretso, no? Isud o ka ng murag condominium type. Pero sa una, sir, did we practice what we call now cremation? Did we
There's an
burn?
evidence in Tila Laguna sa excavation nila Dr. Rosa Canazas. They found in Tila Laguna, which dated to the 1300s, 1400s, cremation. Now we have 3 samples of the cremated jars with cremation soil at ng ash at USC Museum from Tila Laguna na ituluyan na display. How did they know? Kaya doon sila nakuha ang cremation chamber. Tulo ka buok na chamber. So yan ay mga bones nakuha na mga buwak-buwak. So, there was something, yes. And where did we get this? Probably from the Chinese. No, we were already trading with them. And the Chinese, they practiced cremation among the poor. And it's a long practice also in other parts of Northern America, cold parts of America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Do we have more questions for Sir Jobers? 2 more. But before we go to our 2 questions left, let's have one more trivia for our participants here in our webinar. Fast fingers, everyone. Heritage value present in cemeteries because of three species present there. What is the heritage value? Sir Jober cited actually 5, but we need just that one heritage value where referring to probably, especially in cemeteries now, 3 species or flora that are present there. Okay, fast fingers. I hope we can have our winner in a little while so that we can announce. But let's go to our second to the last question before we go to because these are our last 2 questions actually. Next question, please. This comes from James Enrique Walson. Thank you very much for your question, sir. Good afternoon. Burial rites in pre-colonial Bolhoon suggest that gender can be identified by their position. Women if both hands covering their pelvic area, and men when with arms crossed on their chest. Question is there any other burial sites that had the same practice or at least had a distinguished method of burying our pre-colonial ancestors?
Well, we have a very small archaeological community in the Philippines. Very little has been published by these excavations carried out elsewhere. All I know is that these excavations we did in Bolhoon are the only ones we find where this kind of gender identity to the position of the arm was found. So there needs to be more excavations to confirm that, because this is still unique to Bolhoon for now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for answering that question, Sir George. Let's go to our last question. And this is from Judaline Taghoy. Thank you very much for your question, ma'am. I've heard from the informal settlers there in the Chinese cemetery near the gate of Ludo and Luim that those buried there are the poor Chinese people, while the ones in mausoleums are the rich Chinese family. Is this true?
Oh, hi, Judaline. Judaline, I think, yeah. Okay. Yes, there is a Luim Foundation, actually, and I think they help in the burying of the poorer Chinese. The Cebu Chinese Cemetery is owned by the Asociación Benévola de Chinos de Cebu, which takes care not only of the rich Chinese fund the Benévola, including Chonghua, which they own. And then they offered a section of the cemetery to the poor Chinese. Okay, doon na yung mga pobre na Chinese. No, most of them, well, some kay sugarol, na-bankrupt, nag-isod, na ilang pamilyang uban, tulog asawa, mga nana ba. Ang uban mag-isod ka dili wala di opportunities. No? So naagi mga plots na individual lang, cross lang or katong paora sa una or katong murag omega, kada nga Chinese yung karaan. It's a large section na punong sakot na karoon nga dihakit na kaberi ang mga poor. Ay, quadrant man ano, upat ka sections man ng Chinese cemetery. The southeastern section, nag-alok sa anang luluan-luin na marker na taas kayo nga nahihinisik ng karakter. Galok daw na siya on the plot sa mga pobre na in town na isip na kanang two marker nga, kung dili Kristyano, no? Kanang murag two marker nga slab na naingalan sa ilubong. And then, of course, yes, ang mausoleum sa mga dato kita. Kaya pala, may problema na tungkol kang palayan, ang mausoleum today, kanang simple lang, one room. It's about 1 million to 1.5 million. Hindi ako pan po ng kitchen, yung aircon, yung daanan, matuog during kanang kalag-kalag, mga taong pamilya, mga putong. So, you can just imagine, sa Sapaco Park, grabe ka na mga mausoleums diyan. Although they try to limit, I think, the design on that space. Pero, ang tawag kasi mga tao may kalabuan dahil sa design sa mausoleum. Uy, nag-usap siya siya mausoleum. Atungos po na nga ito may karaan. So, na-status symbol, prestige nga attached. So, yan. Na-murag contestation nga unwritten na, uy, na-modernize sila. Ito na sa tagatong aircon sa mga ganana.
Okay.
Okay.
So distinguished good ang for the poor Chinese and the rich Chinese. So thank you very much for answering that question, sir. And I think that was our last question. And with that, we close our Q&A. And of course, we thank Dr. Jose Eleazar Bersales, Sir Jobers, for giving us the time of day. He's very busy. In fact, this is actually his very rare kanang R&R. So, but iya jud tang gi-accommodate. Thank you kaayo, Sir Jobers. And of course, we're going to give you a certificate, sir. Let us show our certificate of appreciation for Sir Jobers, please. And this goes to a certificate of appreciation from the Gabii sa Kabilin goes to Dr. Jose Eleazar Bersales for sharing his expertise and time as resource speaker of the webinar Eternal Rest, Enduring Heritage, Exploring the Past in Cebu Cemeteries through the Gabii's Kabilin 2021 online activity for November, given this day, 26th of November 2021 at the Rafi the Kabilin Center here at the Eduardo Aboite Street, Cebu City. Signed, Ms. Amaya Aboite's Chancellor, Rafi President and CEO. Sir, we'll send this to you. And sir, hinaot dili ka mag kanang sana wa jud ni kanang sani boy puol-puol ang kaning imuhang pag accept sa mga invitation sa Gabii sa Kabilin, sir, and padung na sa tamang Gabii sa Kabilin, sir, next year. Hope to see you.
Let's visit the cemeteries midnight.
Yeah, for Gabii sa Kabilin, di na mahuman ang Gabii sa Kabilin kay midnight ra batakuto magdaghan ang mga to for midnight. With that, well, thank you again very much, Sir Jobers, and you can now finally continue your R&R.
Enjoy the beach.
Enjoy, Kandaya. Bye, sir. Thank you. And with that, of course, we'd like to also thank the GSK Gabii sa Kabilin partners for 2021. And of course, I'd like to thank the Gabii sa Kabilin organizing committee, Melka, Rave, Renren, Sig, Verla, and Mac, who are, of course, very busy behind the scenes ensuring that everything runs for this webinar. And we'd also like to thank Chad, who is ably assisting us for our stakeholder management, our link to DepEd, to the private schools. And we'd like to give a special thanks to the heads of DepEd 7, the public and private schools like the University of San Carlos, and the Mandaue City Organization of Private School Administrators Incorporated. And we'd like to remind you that no one has answered correctly our third trivia question, so that the question will be posted again after this webinar. But we also have 2 more trivia questions, so more prizes. So please watch out for that. And the first one, again, to comment their right answers or correct answers gets a prize from us. And for those who won the first 2 trivia, don't worry. our my colleagues here, the organizing committee, will reach out to you to tell you how to get your prize. And we'd also like to again remind you about the evaluation how do you call this link that we are going to be posting right after this webinar for those who want to get an e-certificate. And again, it's only until 11:59 tonight, so we're going to close that at midnight. But most importantly, this is November, so we're down to our last GSK online activity for the year next month in December. And we have a special online activity next month because we are going to, as mentioned actually previously, I've mentioned this several times, we are going to have our own GSK online exhibit. And this is very interesting because we will see the evolution of GSK 15 years ago and what are the highlights, what were the changes. And we'd also like you to go back down to memory lane and remember your GSK experiences. But before that, I'd like to show maybe a teaser video of this exhibit. So on December 17, we will have a brief launching of the online exhibit, and then we can see the actual exhibit ourselves. So watch out for that. We'll see you on December 17 for the launching of the GSK online exhibit, and you can also, of course, visit our online exhibit right after that. And we'd also, of course, like to thank everyone who has participated in this GSK webinar in November. We hope to see you, of course, not just in December, but we will be continuing in the next year. And just a hint, because it seems that our last GSK online activity in October, which was the GSK Quiz Ball, was such a hit that we'd like to continue this. So I see some comments already about the online exhibit, some excitement there. Thank you very much. We'll see you in December 17. And with that, we'd like to thank everyone, of course, again, and we'd like to say goodbye, and please stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable time and for participating in our webinar today. We hope to see you again next month for another Gabii sa Kabilin online activity to appreciate and experience Cebu's culture and heritage. Please don't forget to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, daghang salamat!